So 2026 is the year of the fire horse, which historically means things like unstoppable speed and transformative fire. But what does that actually mean for someone listening right now who's already feeling like everything's moving way too fast?
You're actually really hitting the point, because astrology is all about symbolism. So when we're talking about the year of 2026, imagine you are riding on the on a horse that is being spurred. So the good thing about this energy is a little bit like saying, well, we are moving fast and we are gaining the momentum compared to 2025, which was the year of the wood snake. And that's a completely different story. But when we are moving forward, we also need to understand that we have to focus, because you don't want to, look at your iPhone and, do other things when you're driving a fast car or you're actually on, on the horseback. And we will also never let a small child stand right behind a horse, because we know horse riding is exciting, but also it can be quite dangerous.
I'm Melissa Monti, and you're listening to Mind Love.
And so one of the things that we need to focus on in 2026 is to absolutely let us move forward, right? Translate a lot of those old ideas from the previous cycle into very decisive actions. But at the same time, this year needs a lot of awareness of how fast we're going, and whether our action is aligned with, the so-called universal good, right, around us, rather than just charging everywhere and, wreaking havoc. Specifically, even when we combine this with Western astrology, I'm sure that you have heard of this. This year, we're having a very important planet conjunction, Saturn, Neptune conjunct in Aries. And that has a lot to do with our leadership. That has a lot to do with our action, right? The so-called balance between our illusion versus practicality. And so I think this year is about moving forward, but more important than that is about balance.
Well, like I said, it feels like time has sped up in the last few years. What are we coming off of astrologically that would have us already feeling some of these things before we even get to the year of the fire horse?
A lot of things already happened, right? I mean, when we, as an astrologer, every day one thing that we all do is we watch news. And what we're trying to see, okay, this is happening in certain countries, and or, either that's a good thing or it could be a disaster. And what is happening actually in the sky? And how do we find the patterns of those, things that we can learn? And astrology is about history. So in terms of, let's say, what has been happening, right? What is our preparation? And how do we move into the year of the fire horse? It's all about learning from, let's say, the past 12 months, specifically in the year of the wood snake. Because snake it's an animal that shed old skins. So 2025, the past 12 months was all about shedding the old skins, shedding the old patterns, and completing sort of like this, achieving the sense of completion, right, within each one of us. And even in the ancient, let's say the Egyptian symbol of Ouroboros, it's a snake biting its own tail, okay, completing its own cycle. It's a little bit like that energy in 2025. So when we're moving into 2026, it's a little bit like saying, okay, now we're getting on the horse, but this horse can only work for you when you have really learned the wisdom of the snake. It's a little bit like that. So usually when people tend to separate each year, okay, horse is a horse, okay, finally year of the snake finished, okay, I'm happy, done. All right, let's now move forward. No. The snake was the foundation of the horse, and that's what is the previous year of the fire horse. You have to go through the year of the snake to get to the horse. But have we learned our lesson? The snake is actually a very wise animal, especially I think in Western culture, even in the Old Testament, right? In the Christian culture, you have the snake whispering at Eve's ear and saying that, eat the apple. Why do you think the snake knows? Because the snake is a very wise animal. They know things. And so snake, usually it's about the kind of wisdom or the lesson that we have to learn before the so-called shedding the old skin or before the so-called transformation.
Can I tell you how I started my 2026 year so far?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Literally shedding skin. I went to Mexico. That was supposed to be a 3-day trip. I got minor sun exposure, like 15 to 20 minutes. Turns out I have a 1 in 50,000 pregnancy autoimmune issue that causes my immune system to attack like minor skin disturbances. And so my feet reacted as though they turned into complete 2nd-degree burns bubbling up. They had to remove the skin from my feet. I was stuck in Mexico for like an extra week and a half. Couldn't walk. I'm actually today's the first day that I don't have to bandage my left foot. Like it's been so intense. And I was there with a bunch of witchy women, like the people who are willing to look deeper. And they're like, this is the year of the snake. I don't think this is coincidental. You literally cannot walk forward as the same woman into this year right now. So I feel like I am ready for the fire horse. I'm done with the snake.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all symbolism, to be honest. Sometimes you look at what's happening in the sky and you look at what's happening in our daily life, you realize, okay, and that's actually, how our ancestors live their lives. For thousands of years, we were looking for hints from the sky. And of course, something we are able to interpret them these days. For example, when the ocean waves the tides are high, the tides are low, right? And when do we spread the seeds? When do we harvest? And we have been observing the sky for thousands of years. But nowadays, we just believe that, well, there are more things from the sky that we can get hint from. So for example, when you talk about the year of the wood snake last year, and at the same time, we are shedding we're shedding old skins, right? And we are letting something go. And what is interesting is that the experience that you had, well, it was a burn, right? It was a reaction of your body. And so in a way, it was not pleasant, right? It was definitely not a pleasant experience. And so shedding the old skin is a painful experience, actually. People usually, when a lot of people, especially my clients, say, "Oh, I'm really feeling, I'm transforming, I'm going through this very, transformative, period of time." And I said to them, "Well, probably not yet, because transformation is not like an angel, I don't know, putting sprinkles on your head and you feel like, wow, life is amazing." Shedding the old skin is a very painful experience. It requires a lot of letting go, requires a lot of determination on your side, and you really have to burn things, right? To say that this is done. I'm never going to look at that again. And so, back to your story, I think that's exactly what, the personal experience that you had, related to the year of the snake. Yeah.
Right. And I don't think it's a coincidence either. I mean, I don't think anything's a coincidence, but I'm 8 months pregnant right now with my 3rd baby. There's all these like mother wound issues happening with my own mom. And then I'm stepping into this new portal, really, it feels like. And so I am grateful for the place that I'm in now to be able to see the symbolism in real time. Doesn't mean there wasn't a lot of crying and screaming and sometimes still, like I'm actually still really emotionally processing what happened the last month because it was hard and scary and painful. But I trusted that there was something on the other end that was more than just, oh, I'm unlucky. Oh, why is this happening to me right now? It's like, yeah, it's more like, wait, why is this happening? I don't expect to know right now, but I'm open to that guidance when it's available to me.
Yeah. And I just want to, add one more thing. Since you said, you are pregnant now, we believe that every baby is a soul, from the sky, and they consciously choose a family that they want to be born in and they want to experience. Now, it doesn't mean that they all, fight for the perfect family, because every soul has their life, their mission. There are certain lessons they need to learn, in that family. Maybe some kind of parental relationship, thing that they need to master or whatever that is. So I just want to say that to you or to any mother who's listening to this podcast. We all have our childhood issues and we probably are all wounded in a certain way, but your baby knows that. Your baby soul chose you consciously and they wanted to come to you and maybe heal that pain together with you. And of course, going back to what we said earlier about shedding the old skin, they are there with you to shed the old skins together, probably.
That's what I was feeling. Honestly, it was a very bonding experience with my baby. I think I was having a hard time really connecting to this pregnancy because I had 2 miscarriages last year. And so being stuck in Mexico by myself, not knowing people, asking for help from strangers, the thing that kept me going a lot of the times was I need to get through this for my baby. There was a higher calling for me. It wasn't just about me anymore. And so in between screams, I was trying to sing, and I realized that singing actually took away some of the pain. So I was just singing through my pain a lot of the times. And so I could feel the baby with me. But the interesting part is too, all my kids have very meaningful names, especially their middle names, and their middle names were relevant to what was happening at the time. So my first child is Bravery Summit because we moved to the mountains that when we were pregnant. Second one was Maven Storm because his due date was actually on the biggest storm in the history of our town. And we had, it like causes disarray. My midwife couldn't get here. We gave birth at home. It was a whole thing. And I got really attached to the middle name for this baby, Sol, S-O-L, like sun in Spanish. And I wanted it, but I was like, but it doesn't have any meaning yet. And then the sun of Mexico literally scorched my feet and then like brought me through the year of the snake into the whole thing was just so symbolic. And so I was going to say, if I had any doubt before, which I didn't, but it's just more confirmation that everything is happening exactly as it should. That this was divine for me, whether or not I would have chosen it on a human level.
Absolutely. I mean, also this year, 2026, is the year of the fire horse. So it has a lot of energy to do with the sun, actually. Yeah. And your baby is going to be born in the year of the fire horse. So it makes sense, right? Middle name is Sol.
And he's set to be an Aries if he doesn't come too soon. So.
Oh, wow. Another fire sign. Well, it's going to be a very passionate and enthusiastic child.
Should I be terrified of this child?
No, let the soul be who they are. Yeah.
Okay.
100%,
Yes.
Yeah.
Good advice. But I'm so curious because you are teaching Chinese astrology to Western audiences right now that mostly probably know Western astrology.
Yeah.
What is the biggest difference between these two?
So Western astrology is very much about the movement of the actual planets in the sky. So for example, we always hear terms like, Mercury retrograde, right? And people get a little bit freaked out. What does that mean? Well, basically, from an Earth-centric perspective, 3 times a year, Mercury would move backward for about 3 weeks each time. And when we talk about Western astrology, we also say, things like Saturn return. What does that mean? It means that every 29 years, the planet Saturn will orbit back to the same point when you were born. And that happens roughly 28 to 30 years, right? And every birthday is your solar return because we are going around the sun, one orbit, right? So Western astrology has a lot to do with the actual planet movement. And we're studying the angle, or in astrological jargon, we call that aspect between 2 planets, and to understand the psychology behind it. And this has a lot to do with the Jungian studies, or Carl Jung's study related to, the astrology and human psychology. Chinese astrology is to deal with more like our nature, which is more poetic, actually. We're not really looking at the exact movement per se. For example, what degrees, of Saturn is in the sky, in Aquarius, or whatever that is. Chinese astrology has a lot to do with nature, rivers, mountains, trees, the sun, the ocean, right? And the wind and things like that. And they fall under a very big study called I Ching. And the whole study of I Ching is about the relationship between the nature and us. And actually, when you compare Western astrology and Chinese astrology, they're, at the end of the day, in essence, they're the same. Because the planet is a part of our nature anyway. It's just they're too far away that we can't really see them in a very concrete way. But the rivers you can see, you can touch. The water you can touch. The trees, well, the apples are falling from the tree. You can see it and you can pick up the apple, but you can't really touch Saturn. You can't really touch the moon. But they are, at the end of the day, the bigger environment around us. And so in essence, they are the same. We are looking at how the environment is changing and how they are synchronized with what's happening on the earth with us.
So you also, I was really fascinated by the oracle decks that you created. But what I love, I have really dived into mythology this last year. But I was led to it actually because of religious deconstruction.
Yeah.
And really understanding what was stripped from the Bible when they pushed literalism on us rather than these sort of more mythic archetypes. But what I found really fascinating about your oracle decks is that you focus on mortal heroes in your oracle work instead of just the gods.
Yeah.
So why so? And like, for example, what does Helen of Troy teach us that Aphrodite can't? Or is it just different archetypes? Or how are you seeing that?
There are a lot of stories about god and goddesses, actually. And if you look at the oracle cards already published, right, out there, maybe 10 years ago, even, literatures, right, I think we focus a lot on gods because somehow we believe that they're omnipotent and they control everything. And we are simply surrendering to their power. And to be honest, the whole literature in Greek mythology, such as Iliad and Odyssey, was about that, actually, because the gods are fighting in the sky and the soldiers are fighting on the battlefield. And somehow the gods are angry and that affects our life, right? So seems like we're all in a position that is more passive. But what I realized about the mortal story is that they are closer to us because the mortals are us and they experienced similar life stories. But in the ancient days, we used to interpret that as some kind of influence from the so-called divine. It's very interesting about, I think the first time I traveled to Greece was back in 2000, was that 2016 or 17, I think, almost 10 years ago, 9 years ago. I was in a taxi, to a very beautiful ancient site called Delphi, the Oracle. And I was talking to my taxi driver, who was a local Greek guy. And I was telling him that I came to Greece because I'm here to see mythology. I'm here to see the stories. And I asked him, do you believe those ancient heroes existed as a Greek person? Because you grew up in this culture, you studied this, probably when you were in kindergarten, right? You breathe these stories in your culture. And he said, well, we do. Probably there was a guy whose name was Hercules. And probably he had a lot of hard labors he had to complete. But perhaps we exaggerated his stories a little bit. For example, he must have, fought a big tiger or somewhere to save the villagers. But we exaggerated the story. We said he fought a dragon. And thus now in the modern days we think, but there's no dragon. What are you talking about? Well, he fought something and he saved probably a lot of people's lives, but it was not a dragon. It was a tiger, where he was a big bear, something like that. And so he said, a lot of those stories we believe that they are true, but they were just exaggerated. So for our mortal stories, back to your question, right? When I created this deck, Oracle of the Mythic, here we go. This is a deck. Oracle of the Mythic Heroes. I really wanted to use those mortal stories to inspire us because we are creating those stories on our daily life. So, for example, when you said you went to Mexico, right, and you were pregnant and you had to go through, the burn and, not the burn, sorry, the reaction, right, that your body had the immune system reaction towards whatever, the burn with the sun, whatever that is. It was your own mythic journey. And maybe after hundreds of years, your descendant will be talking about the story in a mythical way, talking about your great-great-great-grandmother, right? Before she gave birth, she experienced this, and that told us A, B, and C, all these kind of things. So I do believe that these stories are so relevant to us. They only happened thousands of years ago, but we're still reliving those stories.
I'm going to need you to write a synopsis of my story with a quill pen on like really old paper and leave it under stuff. That way I get immortalized.
Yeah.
But I think we're doing that all the time. I often wonder, I mean, even when you look at the Bible, for example, if you look at the New Testament,
Yeah.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, there's such a different quality to the book of John because the book of John was written at a time where people had already begun really immortalizing Jesus in a different way than the other books did.
Yeah.
And so it's the first one with these long, superfluous sentences that are putting him on a pedestal, whereas the other ones treat him a little bit more like man.
Yeah.
And so you can see how it happens even in our own spiritual texts.
100%. I think Bible studies is a very, very big part of mythology, and very much so. Right. For example, what you said, right, about John, right? All those stories in the Bible, actually, in spirituality, we study them a lot, and we're looking for symbolisms from those stories. And even in oracle decks, you can find a lot of oracle decks that would use the archangels. The archangel Gabriel, the archangel Michael, right? Those names, things like that. So actually, so I have a book coming out next year. I can't really say the name yet because my publisher told me not to release the name yet. But the contract already signed, or we're at the beginning stage of editing it. In that book, actually, I quoted a lot of stories from the Bible. And to use those stories, again, combine that with mythology to teach oracle and tarot.
You also use villains in your new deck.
Yeah.
And so tell us why, because so often I think we're used to just I was going to say vilifying the villain, but obviously, just discounting them, calling them evil. What is the benefit of looking to that kind of mythic journey of a villain?
I think that's a really great point, right? I mean, at the end of the day, no villain is really all villain, and no hero is all hero, like what you said. In this deck, I just got my first copy because as the author, it's called Legends, Heroes, and Villains Oracle. It's going to be released very soon in May on May the 5th globally. In this deck, about 1/3 of the cards are stories from the so-called villains. And one of the examples that I can give to you related to what you just mentioned is in the chapter of Leo, I wrote about a person whose name was Fritz Haber. I don't know if our audience have ever heard of this name. He was a scientist, and he made amazing contribution actually in chemistry back during the time of the First World War. He was a German. Because of his contribution in chemistry, we're able to grow crops much better with bigger productivity, right? And so you can't really say he made no contribution. He made great contribution. But what happened after that was he used his chemistry knowledge to develop chemical weapons to kill people, because he was a nationalist, and he said to his government that my knowledge is to help Germany to conquer the world. So since chemistry will use, for example, poisonous gas is more efficient in killing people, we're going to develop that so that this can help us win. So his knowledge went sort of like astray, if you know what I mean. He could have focused on how to, save people using his knowledge, but he did the opposite. He used it in a very extreme way to kill people, the so-called to protect his own country because he was loyal, and he thought that was his sense of loyalty towards his own government. But he completely disrespected humanity. And so at the end of the day, we can still see similar stories happening now in our society. We think that we are doing something because we're loyal to our belief, or we think we are being extremely loyal towards our government. We're doing the right thing, but we're disrespecting humanity. Still happening right now on the news every day. And so at the end of the day, when we are learning those stories, oh, by the way, this is Thomas Edison on the cover of the guidebook. Anyway, back to what I was saying at the end of the day, we realize that we're the same. There is a hero in us. There's a legend in us. There is also that villain in us. And every person, doesn't matter who you are the CEO of a huge company, controlling thousands of people, or you are just a stay-at-home parent, right? Without a job, dealing with your kid every day. There is always that kind of archetype in us. And what we need to do, I think, which is also the intention when I created this oracle deck, is to be very much aware of that legend, that hero, and that villain within each of one of us. And we have all of them.
I love that because it's so funny. As I mentioned, I've deconstructed from religion, but I had so many questions growing up. And I remember being like, I don't understand how this is just a God of love when didn't he just commit a global genocide right now? Or wasn't he just frustrated and lit this guy on fire or told this person to stone to death or say, oh, hey, go kill all of their cousins and their brothers, or hey, smash babies against a rock. I don't think most people have actually read the Bible very thoroughly, first of all, but it's like we were taught to look at these more mythological figures or mythical figures. And it's like, oh, well, they're not perfect. So how can they be a god? And it's like, well, Jesus also said, ye are all gods. And
Correct,
so we've got all of these parts inside of ourselves. And I've shared with my audience that something that's been really helpful for me in the last few months has been really going deep on parts work with these little parts of myself that I'm ashamed of or don't want to give a voice to. And then they just get louder. Yeah. And just like you were talking, it's like we're all a villain. We all have a part that acts out. There's also a part of us that's wounded or in exile. And then there's the part that manages everything, trying to keep it all together. And I think it gets so confusing when we're trying to reconcile how all those can exist at once. But when we separate them out a little bit, you can kind of see what they want. And to me, that is what I see mythology doing. It's taking these archetypes that we all relate to, and it might not be the totality of who we are. It might just be this one small part of us that needs voice or to be seen or to be mirrored. Yeah. And that's how this can be reflected back to us, where it's like, oh, I see what this journey was about, instead of just kind of stewing in it by ourselves.
Absolutely. And also during different stages of our lives, we might have different archetypes anyway. Maybe during when you were in your 20s, right, you might be very much resonating with, I don't know, the goddess of the moon, Artemis. Maybe because you are goal-oriented, right, you just started working, right, you like how determined and then how staunchly independent Artemis is. But when you get married later, right, you become a wife, you become a lover, you become a partner, then maybe you will worship Aphrodite more. Maybe you think that she was the archetype that you want to embrace because that's a time when you want to give love, right? Or the unconditional loving mother, Demeter, in Greek mythology, who, walked around the whole world to look for her lost daughter, Persephone, who was abducted by the god of the underworld, Hades. I think at the end of the day, one of the most important things when it comes to finding archetype is just to be very open-minded. And it doesn't have to be, your whole life. You're sticking to one archetype, or let's say, oh, I only read Greek mythology. Oh, I only read, Chinese mythology. I only read the Bible. Sometimes we can learn a million different things from all different cultures. And I think it's very, very important that we can be less, less dogmatic about, the so-called beliefs, and be more open-minded. And then a lot of the frictions, specifically, I think on the bigger scale, right, on the international stage, will be much easier to solve.
Right. And I actually resonate with all those. That's the part that I was working with most recently, is I do have 2 kids. I am married. I wouldn't give that up for the world, but I still feel that little Artemis popping up, like, what are we missing right now? Do you remember how easy life was before? You could do whatever you wanted. And I was realizing how guilty I was feeling because of this. And I'm like, no, I'm grateful for my family. It's like I did not want to give it a voice. And so it was getting a lot louder. And so I sat there in a very long meditation, just first of all, letting her vent, then asking her what she needs, like really diving into that one piece of myself. And it's so much easier to do it with compassion
Yeah.
when I'm not judging it, when I'm not identifying with that piece as who I am. It's just this one little part that needs a voice. And another exploration I've really been getting into is that of Mary Magdalene. And in her book, she talks about, really, it's a reframe of the 7 deadly sins, but how it's not about rejecting them completely. It's about finding balance and learning to hold that human part of ourselves in love. And so it's changed how I have viewed holding space, how I viewed like what sin actually is, which I changed a long time ago, but it's like it's missing the mark, but it's also not bringing yourself into balance or judging these pieces of yourself. And I think so many people think, like, look at sin or being bad or whatever in a different way. But I think it really comes back to judgment and forgiveness. And that's really what it means to, when you're not judging yourself, it's like, no, I see you and you're okay. And let's sit here together and talk about it rather than exiling you.
One part is forgiving ourselves, right? And for certain people, they also need to learn how to use that to forgive other people. One of the things that I noticed in my counseling session is that someone would say that, I can't forgive my mother. She never loved me, or, she never was there for me, or, I've always had issues with someone, when I needed them, they were not there. And I think it applies the same theory, right? Like, for example, when I was young, for a long period of time, I felt my father was very absent, even though he was not really absent. I mean, he had a very good marriage with my mother. I mean, we all, there was no divorce, no sort of like, he ran away, anything. Right? My father was there. But for example, from a child perspective, for example, every year we have, school events, right, for kids. And when I was a kid, my father never came to my school events for me. For example, if it was sports day or some kind of, the teacher would ask the parents to come, right, to see the kids do something, a show, whatever that. It's always my mother. My father never came, not even once. And so from a child perspective, I could, which I also did, think that, he didn't really care. He doesn't care about, what I'm doing in school. He just cared about doing his own thing. But the older I grow, the more, like what you said, right, the more understanding we have. It's not just about the sin we committed, but sometimes we misunderstand and we think other people committed against us. And I think a lot of times we can't move on with our lives because we have this, I don't know, whether we should call that grudge or some kind of unresolved resentment that we have. And then later, it's almost like an epiphany when I was talking to a friend of mine, and she said, but being your father is only one of the roles he needed to play. But that's not the only role he was playing in his life. He needed to play the role of a good son to his parents. He needed to play a good role of a husband to his wife. He needed to play the role of a good employee to his boss. And he needed to play the role of a good friend to his friends. So being your father is only one of his roles. But somehow you think that have to be prioritized on top of his list. That's not fair. And that's when I realized that this whole thing is sometimes we're so subjective. And we're only looking at what I am not getting from this, and I deserve it. And you're not giving that to me, or you never gave that to me. And that's why I'm unresolved. But let's say if my father really was there every time for me, which would have been great from my perspective, but maybe he would have to not go to work. He would have to take holidays. He would have to, sacrifice other things. And then that might also at the same time hurt other people's feelings, because they might also needed him at that time anyway. So I think at the end of the day, and then this all comes from compassion, our own sense of compassion towards us, like what you said, right? How we forgive ourselves for the sins that we committed, and also forgive the people around us who are not really the so-called perfect for us.
That hit home a little too hard. It reminds me of something I've heard you say about how chaos is unharnessed energy. And I was actually thinking about this weekend when I told you I was doing parts work, and I was just imagining myself holding this piece that I've been trying to exile, that I've been trying to push away in love, in understanding, in acknowledgement. And I could feel it transforming. It didn't even need to transform into something specific that I had to know. It was just my relationship to it. Didn't feel like it had such a grip over it. And we do that with other people when we can hold them in love or witness them as the truth of who they are instead of this caricature that we've built in our minds.
Yeah.
Is that how you see the idea of harnessing energy that might be unharnessed or chaotic?
I do actually, yeah. But it's rather, I think it's rather a complicated thing, right? I mean, sometimes we are aware of that, but then we are, going astray. One of the challenges I feel in that process is our personal emotion. And that's also the most difficult thing in counseling sessions when I'm actually having a client sitting in front of me, because in counseling, what we do, one of the typical methods that we use in counseling is using the so-called logic or rationality to let them understand their emotion. We call that cognitive behavior therapy. Cognition means your awareness. Logically, you understand it. You are aware of that. And then let's use that to tackle the negative emotion. But the difficulty is that a lot of times we refuse to let that process happen, meaning that we are aware of that rationality. Yes, I understand that's correct. Okay, as a counselor, I understand what you're saying. As a therapist, I understand what you're saying, but I still have my emotion. And so my rationality says, I understand you, but my emotion says, but I still can't let go. I still feel like it, or I still don't feel like it. And usually that's the biggest issue, I think, when it comes to healing and, and things like that. And that really needs a lot of patience, in us to slowly progress. And then one of the best practices, I'm sure you've talked to a lot of psychologists or therapists, in the field. One of the things that I usually recommend my clients to do is writing. It's a little bit like a journaling, right? You talk to yourself. And that usually triggers a lot of self-compassion, and that helps us to translate those rationality into the so-called your personal emotion, and to build a bridge between them. I find that extremely effective. I don't know, do you ever write journals for yourself?
I do. I have 3 modalities of getting things out that I find really helpful, because you're right. With some people, I find it very easy to just say, you know what? I know what to say. I'll own up. I'll be the bigger person. It's the relationships where I've had to be that bigger person, be the first one to come forward over and over again, that I'm just like, fuck this. Okay, like I'm done now. It's been 35 years, whatever it is, or it's been 5 years. But I don't believe that forgiveness is always for the other person. I think oftentimes when I get to that place within myself, it will open the door to kind of bridge between me and that person, but it doesn't always have to. And there's certain people that I do not want back in my life because of the damage they caused. But forgiveness is still important because I don't want them to have a grip over my psyche. But my 3 modalities are, I do write. I love long voice notes because it's just like I can talk and I know there's going to be no judgment because it's a digital recorder. Yeah. But also just meditation. I have really loved just allowing my thoughts to spiral and then finding that place of peace and see what wisdom comes back to me with my mind out of the way. But in order for that to work, I can't just go inward when I'm in an emotional state and be like, okay, let me see this from the highest perspective. Yeah. I need to let that part vent. I need to get out all of my worries first and be like, she sucks because of this. Like, why did she do this? Like, this is unfair. Like, just a vent session. And then say, okay, what do you need? Okay, now let's just sit in silence. Now let's see what comes through. And I find that with that sort of unloading of whatever my mental burden was, it's a lot easier to allow the space for something that is above my mind to come through. Yeah.
There's one more thing that I recommend, which I personally find extremely effective, which is also related to mythology. There is a mythological figure probably a lot of people are familiar with. Her name is Medusa. And, originally she was a priestess, serving at Athena's temple. But due to a very tragic event, she was, sexually assaulted by god of the ocean, Poseidon. However, Athena did not punish Poseidon. Athena punished her, the victim, and said, well, you are supposed to be a virgin for me because you are my priestess. You're not allowed to let anyone touch you. Well, some, version of the myth said that she was assaulted. Some version said she was seduced by Poseidon or Neptune, and she willingly had sex with him. But it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, she was turned into this ugly monster by Athena. And eventually, Perseus, the Greek hero, when we're talking about his journey, he used a mirror as a reflection, so that he didn't have to look at Medusa into her eyes. And so through looking at her reflection, he was able to kill her and conquer her, right? And eventually, the story has a victorious ending. So her story has a lot to do with the mirror. This thing actually we look at every day in our lives. I realize a lot of the breakthroughs can happen when we just take a minute to look into the mirror every day. Literally look into the mirror. We never look at ourselves, to be honest. I mean, how many times do you see yourself every day? In the morning, maybe when you are brushing your hair, right, washing your face, you might see yourself. Before you go to bed, maybe you look at yourself very quickly. Okay, now my makeup is off, now I can go to bed. And that's it. But every day we're looking at other people, right? You're working, you're walking around. So this mirror talk, or look in the mirror, look at yourself and talk to yourself, is a very, very rare thing that we do. And sometimes if you try doing that for the first time, you might realize it's very embarrassing. It's almost like, I can't talk to myself. What are you talking about? That's weird. But that's so effective in terms of breaking through your mental blockage. Like, especially when I'm in a very chaotic or just very upset with myself, right? Because of whatever things, either could be because of anger or old wound, resentment, or whatever negative emotion that I'm going through. I go to the bathroom and look at myself, and I talk to myself. I was literally saying to myself, like, I hate seeing you this way. Like, I hate looking at, because your face looks like different. This is not you're supposed to look like. And whenever I see myself in the mirror, when I'm in a very, very negative mindset, it helps me to get out of it. Because I would tell myself that I don't allow you live this way. This is not how you are supposed to live your life, looking like this. And I would hate other people see you this way too. And so this is something that I will really recommend to our audience. If anybody is listening to our podcast with a wound that they're trying to solve, this is really something worth a try.
Ooh, I usually ask for a challenge at the end of the episode, but I think that one's going to be it because it's really good. I would push back and say I'm pretty sure women look at themselves in the mirror a lot more often. But what came to mind while you were talking is that we don't do it to connect. It's oftentimes with judgment.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this hair is out of place. How do I fix this? Oh, this wrinkle. Oh, I need Botox, whatever it is. And also men in California. To be honest, I had a boyfriend who looked in the mirror way more than I did. But the connection of that, the speaking to it actually reminds me of a process I went through when I was healing from my eating disorder. I started speaking to myself like I was speaking to a child or something. It's like, you're going to have those 3 cookies. You're going to think it's fine, but it's a trigger food. And then you're going to spiral. You're going to eat the whole thing. And then you're going to go into the bathroom and you're going to throw it up. And then you're going to have already broken the seal today and you're going to do it again. Yeah. And so I would talk like that. And it was so helpful because I was externalizing the internal, hearing it in a different way rather than just giving it more validity by keeping it in my mind. Yeah. And it really, really helped me to move through it and take action.
100%. Yeah. Just for our audience, because you mentioned eating disorder. I believe that a lot of people suffer from that. I mean, personally, I never had that, but I've seen a lot of patients who suffer from that, especially women. In mythology, there's a figure called Persephone. When she was abducted by Hades into the underworld, she stopped eating. And usually in a reading session, when we're looking at the cards, right, whenever a client is asking about health issues, and I see Persephone card happening there, showing up, and usually I would say that, well, you gotta be careful with your nutrition. Because Persephone literally hurt her own body because she was so sad that she was trapped in the underworld. And she said to Hades, if you don't let me go, I will stop eating. And that like, I will die of hunger if you don't let me go. And so, and that actually, well, that didn't really change anything, but actually she hurt her own body. She just weakened more and more until, her mother reached an agreement with Zeus to rescue her from the underworld. And so I think with a lot of us who have nutrition or eating disorder or these kind of challenges, reading stories of Persephone and getting in touch with Persephone's energy could be very important.
Ooh, it's so interesting that you said that, because that was one of the things I was connecting with. I told you how I was really diving into Mary Magdalene's interpretation of the 7 deadly sins, but she also calls them gifts, like when you get to this point of balance. And gluttony is one of them. And so many people just assume it's overeating, but it's not overeating. It's not indulging in sweet treats around Christmas at all. That can be a big gift of food. It's about indulging in anything, whether it's food, doom scrolling, drugs, to the point of self-harm, to the point that where you're going against what your higher self would actually want, what your true self actually wants. And I think we've got all these little misinterpretations that cause us to judge ourselves more or feel like we are failing as humans, when really it's just this little imbalance and a normal human thing that we're all going through.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also, the mirror thing that I mentioned earlier, I find that very effective when it comes to addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whenever we are addicted to something, let's say now I just need to do it because even though my brain's saying that you will regret later, you're going to regret later. You're going to enjoy that 2 minutes pleasure. And after that, you're going to hate yourself, right? Because in our brain, we know that, but still we want it at that moment because of that rush of adrenaline, whatever that is. And look into the mirror. It will cool you down. Because it's a little bit like someone's looking at you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you feel, I can't do this, right? But when you're alone, you can allow yourself to indulge in that pleasure. But when someone is standing there watching you, then you feel like, oh, no, I can't do this, right? So look at yourself. And this is extremely effective when it comes to any type of addiction, I realize.
I really like your blend of, because you're a trained counselor with a master's degree, but also the astrology side. I'm curious, do you see a difference, or how do you integrate spiritual preparation and psychological preparation, or is it just sort of the same thing in your mind?
So it's been a journey, actually, because when I was trained as counselors, I remember I used to work with a company. They are an online counseling company, meaning that like you do counseling with clients through text messages. It's a new way of doing counseling. I mean, which is not really something that I prefer, because I realize that counseling is a very intimate thing. You really need to have the clients face-to-face communication. Text messages usually is not very, very effective. But I remember when I was working with them, they wanted me to do a workshop, right, about, my counseling experience. And we had this problem about integrating my practice of mythology and astrology into it. Because to them, they think, whoa, it's too witchy. Oh, we are PhD psychologists. We don't do that kind of stuff. We are academics, whatever that is. And so in a way, it's very funny because spiritual people, we 100% embrace the scientific way of psychology. We study it and we do research, we follow that way, and we think they make great contribution to our society, to understand our human mind. But somehow a lot of the scientific people reject spirituality because they say it's not scientific, you don't have proof. Literally 2 weeks ago, I was in Bangkok, in Thailand. I was in a dinner having a chat with several people I just met at that dinner, and we were having this great conversation about astrology and the Carl Jung studies, right? Because Carl Jung was the first psychologist who embraced astrology and also dream interpretation, things like that. And suddenly during that conversation, a lady just cut into our conversation and said, "Oh, I don't believe in anything that you guys discussed. I think astrology is something for people who are bored." And I said, "Okay, so what do you do for living?" And she said, "Oh, by the way, just let you know, I'm a scientist." And I'm thinking, okay, that's great, right? And good for you. But But I think that at the end of the day, the most important thing is everything can actually contribute to your mental health. You just need to know how to use them. And if someone's understanding about astrology, it's something written on a magazine. If you're an Aries, you're gonna get a gift next month, and then you realize I'm an Aries and I'm not getting a gift next month, and that's why astrology does not work. Then probably you're not really reading the real astrology, because astrology is not about if you're an Aries, you're gonna get a gift next month. It's about the relationship between us again with our nature, and the synchronicity between the close by nature, which is again the trees, the rivers, the birds, and the far away nature are the planets. I always give this example to people. I say when you see the dragonflies flying very low, you realize, oh, probably it's gonna rain later, and probably I need to go home now, or I need to bring an umbrella if I need to go out. Astrology is like that. When you're seeing certain planets are moving in certain patterns, you realize, okay, maybe this is a hint for something based on the history. Because every time when the planet is moving this way, certain things might happen. So there is a sense of cosmic regularity there. Let's follow that. And usually we realize that that works. And also, some people say, but how do you use science to explain why certain things will happen? And I would say that, but there are millions of things that we believe in, but they're not scientific. For example, art is not scientific. You go to an art museum, you see a beautiful painting, and it's, I don't know, let's say it's not a beautiful, let's say it's abstract, okay? It's $3 million US. But do you really think it's worth $3 million? Is there any scientific proof telling you that that art is $3 million? Nothing. But some people will pay. Some people believe in it. Some people will think that this art will bring them tremendous joy. But for you, you think it's crap. You wouldn't even pay $1 for that art. Something like that. Or love is not scientific. Let's say you know that certain people you're not supposed to love, but you still love them. That's not scientific. That's not logical. That should not be in our world at all. But we still embrace them and we still follow them. And so I think when it comes to astrology, the most important thing is to understand, again, the relationship between our nature and us. And we're always able to find some hint from them, and which can benefit our mental health and our journey.
Great way to put it. I think so many people confuse scientism, because I feel like it's more like a religion, and materialism, where it's like, you know, there is a science that studies energy. I'm sorry that you're not attuned to that. I'm sorry that you're limiting yourself to what the small spectrum of light and sound that you can currently see right now. But that's not scientific either. Just because you're not diving into it doesn't mean you're embracing the science. But yeah, I could rail against and for science forever, but we already did our challenge for this episode because I think that mirror work is so powerful. Would you like to add any understanding to that?
Okay. So maybe at the end of our chat, I'd like to just share one quote, maybe from Rumi, whom I deeply loved, was an ancient Persian philosopher and poet. And I always love this quote from him. He said, you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a single drop. And I literally have this quote on my desk, and I look at it every day. And I think there are so many different ways to interpret this quote and this sentence. To me, I think the so-called "you are the entire ocean in a single drop" is basically just saying that as an individual, in a way we can feel that, okay, we are so small. Well, I'm just one person. What can I change? What can I do? Right? I don't have control over everything. But at the end of the day, the whole universe is within you. And there's just so much to explore, and there's so much for us to understand. And through understand our personal cosmos, and we'll be able to expand this and to influence positively on the society and the world around us. And I just want all of us to always remember that cosmos, that limitless cosmos that is within each one of us, and never think that we're too small to make something happen, or we're too small to make a positive influence on the society.
Well, for listeners that are really resonating and they just want to learn more from you, where's the best place for them to connect?
So my official website is www.thehealingkingdom.com. These days, a lot of people use, social media, Instagram. I do have an official Instagram account, where I update content every week, which is just my name, Letao Wang, Letaowang. That's my official Instagram account where people can reach me. And if you like Oracle cards, if you want to use my cards, you can also find Oracle of the Mythic Heroes, right? This deck, and also Oracle of the Celestial Deities. These two decks are already on Amazon for sale, and Legends, Heroes, and Villains Oracle will officially start on May the 5th, but now it's open for pre-order on Amazon already.
Want to work through this week's Mind Love Challenge with others? The Mind Love Collective is a free community with monthly themed calls, weekly challenge accountability, and real support throughout the year. So join us at mindlove.com/join. Thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.